Hi, and welcome back to Abilene People, our podcast here on bigcountryhomepage.com, where we talk to Abilene's most interesting people. And today we've got a guy from Abilene who's really, really interesting, Rosten Callarman.
Thanks for having me, Danny.
Hey, thanks for being here. You are the executive director for Habitat for Humanity Abilene.
That's right.
And you've got a lot of expertise in affordable housing for low-income persons,
Sure.
Housing for the homeless, caring for the poor. You have a lot of gravitas and expertise in those areas, partly because of your training, but partly because of the way you live your life. I mean, so I want to get into all that. Is there anything we can't talk about today on this podcast, Rosten Callarman?
I'm not very up on the state of professional sports. Okay. So if you try to get my opinion on that,
steer away from that.
I won't have much to say.
Although I will say that tomorrow night on Thursday, September 4th, the Dallas Cowboys open the NFL season in Philadelphia against the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. And you can see that game right on KRBC, our NBC affiliate.
I do know enough to know that it's been a few years since the Cowboys have been very good at anything.
Well, let's just move right along, shall we? Because the truth hurts.
Not to alienate too many listeners.
You have self-described yourself. You have described yourself as a husband, a dad, a goofball, a dreamer, and I'm working to end poverty. All those things still true. Especially, I'm interested in the goofball part.
Sure, yeah. When I put that on, I think it's one of my social medias. When I put that up there, I specifically added the goofball part because, the more that I've gone into leadership and the more that I've had to be in charge of different things, it's easy to kind of lose those parts of your personality. And that's just kind of a core part of who I am. I'll get up in front of city council or I'll, speak to something and it's easy for that stuff to not come out. But, my staff gets to see that part of me a lot. My family obviously gets to see that part of me a lot. And that's really important to me. I started off my career as a youth minister, and it's pretty hard to be a youth minister if you don't have, a funny bone in you. And so I loved being able to have that kind of relationship with young people, and now I get to have that kind of relationship with my kids, and actually most of my staff are older than me, but even with that, I get to have that kind of relationship with my staff.
Yeah, it seems like we do live in this strange dichotomy of a world where, our public persona is supposed to be uber serious, but let's relax and not take ourselves so seriously.
Oh, for sure. Well, I tell my staff all the time, work was made for us, not we weren't made for work. It's kind of a take on, in Scripture when Jesus said, Sabbath was made for man, man was not made for Sabbath. The work stuff, we got to get that stuff done, but we're humans first. And especially whenever you spend as much or more of your time weekly with the people you work with as you do with your family, I mean, if we can't enjoy each other's company, that's pretty sad. We don't have to be friends, but we should at least try to, enjoy our lives.
I love that. So I want to know where you're from, where were you raised, and how you got to Abilene.
Sure. Yeah, interestingly enough, I just visited my hometown this past weekend. My son and I went on a father-son trip. We went down to Enchanted Rock, and then we hit Natural Bridge Caverns, and then we went down to the coast and went surfing together, and he loved it. It was a lot of fun. I grew up in Portland, Texas, which is just outside of Corpus Christi. It's changed a lot. I moved away 23 years ago to go to college. Went to A&M University, and I came to Abilene to get a master's degree in ministry. My intent was to go into ministry. My intent was not to stay in Abilene. I was going to go work at a church somewhere or be a missionary somewhere. And the longer that I spent time working in churches, I kept having this experience where I would get grumpy about church. I would get really frustrated, and it didn't make me a very good minister. It's not good to be cynical about church and frustrated at church and try to minister to people. But I kept having this expectation that the church was going to have this different purpose and do things like fight homelessness or fight against poverty, or these very good goals that are also not specifically the church's goals. And then finally one day I had this I'm sometimes not very smart. Finally, I had this realization. Oh, there's another type of organization that does that. It's public charities. It's a different kind of nonprofit. I should go do that. I should stop being this miserable, lame minister who isn't happy doing what he's doing, and I should go work in nonprofits, and which of course a church is a kind of nonprofit, it's just different kind of nonprofit. And I made that decision first when back in I think 2011 or 12. I was working at Noah Project. I was the first male victim advocate that Noah Project ever had, which was an incredible experience. It was a very difficult experience too.
I want you to say that again because that's interesting to me, and it seems to me to almost be an honorific. Hey, I was the first male who served as a victim advocate for one of Abilene's really important nonprofits that watches out for victimized women and children.
Sure, yeah.
You're the first guy to ever do that?
Yeah, it was strange. There had been male staff, but for whatever reason, there had never been a male victim advocate, like someone who worked in that case management role that's like specifically taking care of the people that were coming out of abuse role. They had like grounds type people or operations type people, but no one had ever done my job as a guy before. Wow. Which was also interesting because then before I was gone, there was 2 other guys also doing that role at the same time, and I don't know what it was about that time period that just meant that there were so many guys that had come into that role. Though I do know that one of them was one of my soccer buddies, so that was probably part of it, was just me being there.
And then shortly after that, you transitioned to the leadership of Habitat for Humanity Abilene, because you've been there, I think, how many years have you been there?
Well, there was a pretty big gap between the two. I actually ended up back in ministry for a little while.
Okay.
I did some preaching for a little while.
I've got my decades mixed up because you were talking 11.
Yeah, that was 11, 12. Okay. That was over a decade
ago. 10 years later, you became. So what happened in that decade in between?
Yeah, I ended up working in churches again for a little while. Did a little bit of preaching. Just didn't feel like I was a very good preacher. Didn't feel like it was the right fit for me. I was the communications director for a church planning organization. And then it so happened I had the opportunity to do some property investment with my dad. He had money and I had time, and so that worked out well.
Nice.
And
now,
so
I just want to hit the pause button. Mm-hmm. What kind of preacher were you? Were you a hailfire and brimstone type preacher, or were you a let's reason together kind of preacher, or were you let's keep this short so we can make it to the restaurant kind of preacher?
Probably some blend of the second two. I'm not.
Hey, that's my kind of preacher.
I'm not very good at trying to scare people into heaven. I don't know if anyone's actually very good at trying to scare people into heaven, but that's a different conversation. No,
Is that the same thing as scare the hell out of people? Is it scare people into heaven? Are those synonymous?
Well, I do that sometimes as well. Like I probably scare that on my board sometimes. No, I loved the church, and I think coming to the realization that I could be myself and let the church be itself by finding a vocation in charities was a huge moment for me, because it meant I could stop being such a grump about the church. You know, the church is an amazing thing. It is the community of God here on earth. And diving into my ministry background here, but then take off my nonprofit director hat and put the old. It's an old hat, doesn't fit very well anymore. It's kind of dusty.
Do we need to find "Just as I Am" in the hymnal? Or
that's a great song. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
I adore that song.
It's a good one.
It's the church is God's people gathering here on earth, and there's a lot of amazing things that can happen here, but that's the mission of it. The mission of it is transformed lives with the purpose of a transformed humanity and a transformed earth. But the specific missions of individual nonprofits, like that, me expecting the church to be that, was unrealistic and unreasonable. Like it was trying to push things in a church that just aren't only the church, which is one of the amazing things about the fact that I get to work with Habitat for Humanity now. The founder of Habitat for Humanity, he considered Habitat to be something along the lines of a parachurch organization. It's a separate legal entity, a separate nonprofit, but he believed that Habitat, by doing our mission in the world, would invite the church into doing more of the church's work by alleviating poverty.
And hey, I think that that's been fulfilled in a lot of ways because my wife and I were a part of a church in Fort Worth that worked with Habitat closely for a number of years
Good.
and built 2 houses a year for a number of years and then one house a year for a number of years. So there was the founder of Habitat and your vision coming to life. I want to get to Habitat, but I do want to, while we're talking about this, ask you one thing because you're very eloquent and you said it so well, and I think there's a certain degree of emotional maturity that comes with that. You're able to see that, you're able to say that. Let's move on with our lives and be friends in the nonprofit world and in the church world. Having said that, I wonder, though, if there's still not room for appropriate critique of Western imperialistic theology that seems to be embedded in the modern day, particularly evangelical church, because that's kind of where my headspace lives, just to be transparent about it. And it's I want to be as complimentary and gracious as you are, but boy, oh boy, it just seems to be frustrating. It just seems to me the church sure could use a little bit of this. We ought to see the needs of the poor and not just the needs of wealthy people that like fog machines and fancy sound systems.
Yeah.
Am I too cynical?
No, there is definitely a place for critique of the modern church. And that's I'm not opposed to any of that kind of critique. I'm part of a local church, and I regularly have tough conversations with the staff of my local church, though I'm also careful to support them as well as I can because I also, I lead an organization, and so I know how hard that is. And I think a lot of times people forget that their pastors are also organizational leaders who have just a ton of stuff on their shoulders, and we need to have grace for our leaders as well.
And often with not much organizational training, not a lot of business training, and they're thrust into a role where they've got to, really you need like my good friend Marcus, who happens to have an MBA and an MDiv. Well, he's well suited. He's well suited. But Marcus, by the way, has left the church, the institutional church, because he just couldn't. Anyway, that's another conversation. But yeah.
That's a cool guy, though.
That's a very cool guy. Very, very, very well equipped. Okay, so you get to Habitat, and you've been there now 4 years, almost exactly, right? I mean,
yeah, a couple weeks ago. It was my 4-year anniversary.
So you guys build affordable housing for people who otherwise could not have a home. Is that accurate? Is that a fair way to put it?
I would nuance it a little further than that. So if you imagine poverty, economics, the housing market as a ladder, so the bottom of the ladder is the bottom of our market. It's the poorest of the poor. The top of the ladder is the top of the market. It's the most wealthy people in the world, and then the middle is it's what we would consider area median income. The higher you go up on that ladder, the more well structured it is, the stronger the rungs might be gilded with something. But, when you go below that middle of it, and even in the middle of it at this point, because of how much our economy struggled to keep up with disparity in the past few decades, as you go lower, the rungs are in disrepair. They're more broken the further you get down, to the point where, like, the bottom rungs of the ladder are often just completely missing. Period. Or at least unusable.
And so we're talking about people here in our community who just can't get a hold of the process, get on the pathway to homeownership. And that's what you're opening opportunities for them. And how does that happen? And also, if you don't mind, I'll throw in another question in the question. Talk about your accomplishments at Habitat, because you guys have built an awful lot of homes for people in a market that the market doesn't always accommodate the people who access your homes. Is that fair?
Sure. Well, let me clarify a little bit more. So with that ladder that I'm describing, the bottom half of the ladder makes the people that are helped in Abilene by local nonprofits. There's a range of organizations in that bottom half of the ladder. The very bottom, I say the bottom half, or sorry, the bottom quarter of the ladder. That's where you start getting into some really important nonprofits who do something more along the lines of relief work. They do, someone's fallen through the cracks of our economy. There's no world where they can get out of the depths that they're in without some assistance. So I'm thinking about like Abilene Hope Haven. I'm thinking about the housing programs with Betty Hardwick Center. I'm thinking about Noah Project is often serving this population. City Lights, Community Ministries, some incredible organizations that are working with some folks that could not survive without them. That population is lower income than our typical population. And this is a specific decision that our board of directors made within the past 4 years, because we were serving a lot more of that population before, until we realized there's so many organizations focused in Abilene on that group specifically, but there's almost no one focused on the next quarter up. The quarter from the second quarter of the ladder. So just below the middle, there's from 80% to 50% of area median income. There's a lot of people that are renting and paying and living month to month, paycheck to paycheck, that if they had the opportunity to buy their own home, they could potentially become middle income. They could stabilize a lot. They could get to the point where they're not living paycheck to paycheck, or at the very least, they would be investing in their own home rather than renting and paying for someone else's home, building equity. That's the group that Habitat for Humanity is focused on. And that's a bit of a change from where the founder of Habitat thought that we would end homelessness. That's a beautiful image. And obviously I worked in the Homeless Coalition for years, and I would still like to figure out a way for us to be more part of that. But if someone's that low income and I put them in a mortgage, I am endangering them financially more than if I had just found them a nice place to rent and help subsidize their rent. I would like to get to the point where we also have the ability to partner more with those lowest income nonprofits and help create opportunity for people to walk up that ladder instead of just saying, hey, you're stuck here, you're stuck here, you're stuck. I want to be able to help people actually help recreate the lowest rungs of that ladder. But we're also a pretty small nonprofit. Our annual budget's $1 million currently. We're always aiming to grow, but we also have to be very clear with where we're at right now and be responsible. So related to that, you asked about, what our accomplishments have been. So in the 35 years, this year's our 35th anniversary, in the 35 years since Habitat for Humanity Abilene was founded, we have been a housing solution for about 180 families. So that averages out to about 5 homes per year. But that's also a little bit misleading because we've had ups and downs, and really the ups was the early years. We were averaging about 8 houses a year for the first 15 years of our existence, 8 closings per year sales. And with a high, there was one year, I don't remember what, it was the late 90s, we actually sold 15 houses in 1 year. That's huge. And we've never come close to that since. But then there was also a period from 2016 to 2021 when we were only building 1 house per year. And so we had this really low point for a little while there in the end of the last decade, and we're on our way back up. We're not where I want us to be, but we've been averaging about 4 houses a year for the past 3 years. This year, if we can actually hit the goal that I have, which is going to be tight, I'm planning on having us close on 7 houses this fiscal year.
That's amazing. So all of those homes, let's talk about this year. If you do 7, that means acquiring the lot. You could have acquired the lot last year, but you get the gist. Yeah. You have the lot. You do a site development, whatever needs to happen. You pour the slab. You frame it. You put a roof on it. You get it dried in. You do all the electric, and then boom, you move toward completion of the home, and somebody buys it.
Yep.
And the buyer in the Habitat for Humanity model, they're a part of all of that process I just outlined.
Yes.
Right. And so is that where we hear that term sweat equity, and they're involved in this, but then they still have to go and get a loan. And are they advantaged somehow to get a low interest loan or a first time home buyer kind of deal?
I'm working on that right now. So we've traditionally we just made a switch with our board, and I'm really proud of my board of directors for seeing the need for this. Traditionally, we've been the bank for our partner families. Habitat for Humanity executive directors will often brag about all the hats we wear. They say we're the nonprofit, we're the builder, we're the bank, we're the mortgage servicer, and then we're the restore. We're a retail outlet. And I'm looking at which is what we've done in the past. And I'm looking at my staff of 10 people and seeing us try to be 5 different organizations.
Right.
And I'm looking at each of those types of organizations and saying, which of those can I do poorly and not have massive liability risk? Like it's such a dangerous way to run a company. And it's also a financially inappropriate way of running a company. That means that every time we built a house, we had to raise all of the money for the construction costs. And then we were providing a 0% interest loan for those construction costs at closing, which we would then get back slowly over 20 years. But at 0% interest, that means we're not adjusting for inflation, which means we're only getting like half of the money back.
Sustainable?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
No, not at all.
Right.
And it's also funny. I talk with Habitat affiliates across the country, and there's very few outside the state of Texas that are growing that are doing it that old way. And it's being able to say that we're the bank, being able to say that we're doing the 0% interest loan. It's nice. It was a great marketing tool for a long time. But the reality is when we started doing that 50 years ago, because Habitat International was founded in 1976, when we started doing that almost 50 years ago, the market was so different. Construction was different. The permitting process was different. You didn't have to have a license for most of the stuff that you did on a house. And as all of those things have changed over time, here's another big thing that's changed. Back in the 2008 mortgage crisis, before that, we were not regulated the same way that other mortgage lenders were. But when the Dodd-Frank was passed in, I think, 2010, we started being regulated in the exact same way that other lenders were regulated, which was the right decision. That's how it should have been because we were a mortgage lender. That should have been the moment when most Habitat affiliates said, okay, we should probably stop being the bank because this is just getting outside of our ability as a small nonprofit to handle this. Instead, we said, we're going to learn how to be a bank even better. And that's the decision that my board made earlier this year was to say, we can let banks be banks. We need to determine what's the thing that we can do that no one else can do. Let's do that. And for us, that was being the nonprofit builder.
So do you have one of our local banks that's come alongside you and said, hey, we want to be a part of this and we'd love for you to direct your people to us? You have partners out there. Is it a number of partners? Is that how it's working?
We're working on those.
Okay. Yeah. So I get that.
We have great relationships with especially First Financial Bank and Prosperity Bank on that side of things. I mean, we've got great relationships. I mean, Abilene Teachers Federal Credit Union, they're incredible. We've got really good banks here in Abilene, banks and credit unions here in Abilene.
We have a number of them. I mean,
they're so supportive, and their leadership is, their First Bank of Texas, they're another great one. There's incredible people at these banks who want to do good. We had a difficult, one of the ways that we had to, I'm getting really into the weeds with this stuff, so.
No, it's good. It's interesting. I think people want to know. They'd love to know how is the sausage made.
Well, and it's also funny because I'm
some people
a minister by training.
Yeah,
I don't know this stuff. I'm having to learn it.
We can stumble our way through. It's a podcast. Hey, but in all seriousness, I think there are people out there. I think you know this. Their conventional thinking is that with Habitat for Humanity, you go out, you put in some sweat equity, and voila, you own a free home. Doesn't really work that way.
It's one of the biggest misconceptions about us is the free home thing. And it's also, think about it this way. Every time, let's just say it was costing us $100,000 to build a house. So with the traditional way of doing things, we were taking, for this budget year, we were taking a $100,000 hit every time we did our mission. Name one other organization in Abilene that can take a $100,000 hit every time they do their mission. there's none. That's the idea that that's how we should have continued doing the idea we should have done it that way in the first place is a little bonkers to me. But the idea that we could continue doing that in 2025, no. So yeah, we've got lots of. So First Financial has been an incredible partner. They've some of their leadership has actually been really instrumental in helping us talk through this transition with our board. They're really excited about doing some loans with us. The thing, Prosperity, same thing. I'm talking with a bank down in Houston right now that's working with Houston Habitat. The thing that's been we're really trying to work on right now is the loans that we're doing are so far below market value. So like we're building houses that appraise at $200,000, and our construction costs are so low. We're like compared to the market, we're building at about $85 a square foot right now.
I was going to ask if
It's about half of market
that number.
right now.
And that's incredible. And is that largely because of volunteer labor? Okay.
It's volunteers. It's we've got great subs that sometimes they'll make us deals on materials or on their labor. It's a bunch of different people.
I want to kind of back away from Habitat specific, although obviously it's you know, if something fits and you want to bring Habitat into the conversation, feel free to do so. I kind of a general question from your position. I think you're uniquely positioned to see this. Why is affordable housing becoming so hard to find? And the easy answer in Abilene is becoming the data center. They're bringing in so many workers that are taking up so much rental property. And look, I've developed friends at the data center. Deshelle, their head of DPR construction, will be sitting in your chair here in a week or so, and answering the hard hitting questions. But it's not. It was hard to find before the data center broke ground. A year ago. Why in Abilene is affordable housing getting so difficult to find?
Well, it was hard to find before the data center, and now it's just hard to find housing, period. Like the data center has brought in so many people so quickly, and it's obviously not the core issue, but it's definitely a big exacerbating factor, which does make me wonder what will happen to the market whenever they finish construction and all of a sudden all those workers are gone and it's just the residential workers, which is a fraction of what the construction worker population is.
It's the classic good news, bad news deal. It's really good news for our economy, but there's some potential challenges down the road that come with any. It is the largest construction project going on in America today, and one of the largest in the world.
Yeah.
And it's happening right here in our city.
Incredible.
Okay, so I want to discuss maybe related to that. Why is affordable housing so hard to find? It just seems like in our world today, we're seeing the uber wealthy. Just today, Wall Street Journal had an article about identifying 1,130-something billionaires now in America.
Man.
The more billionaires than we've ever seen in our country. Well, hey, that's good news. We're a free market capitalist society. People want to make money, and people are good at making money. Let them make money. I don't disagree with that. I'm sure you don't disagree with that. But that seems to me the challenge is what model will our culture continue to embrace? Will these people be reservoirs that hold all the assets, and there's just a few billionaires and they're getting richer and richer and richer? Or will they be a river that passes the assets on and build a philanthropic world in America? Because at the very same time that's happening, we're seeing the very poor, people who are homeless, people, and not all the homeless are people that don't want to work. One of the myths.
It's very few of them in my experience.
I think my daughter's in this space in Dallas and has been a part of championing the clearing out of the Dallas homeless gatherings or the encampments, which no longer exist in Dallas. And I'm so proud that my daughter was one of the advocates and the key components for all the infrastructure to make that happen.
To help get them out.
To help them get them out.
Positive ways.
In very positive ways.
Not just tear down the camp and say, go somewhere else.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, all of these people, except maybe a very tiny percentage, are in now permanent long-term housing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It just seems like the dichotomy, or I don't know, it's a fancy word, the uber wealthy and the uber poor are both growing. Those communities are both growing in our nation, and maybe even here in Abilene. I don't know if you agree with that. I don't know if you think there's any causes for that you've identified. What do you think about that? And what's the future? Are we just going to is this the trend? Is this the way the treadmill's now going? And so poverty will increase, and then a small number of the uber wealthy will increase. And by God, that's how it's going to be, because these people know how to make money.
Well, yeah, you said you don't know if I agree or not. I don't know if there's a agree or not thing, because I think a lot of that's just fact. I mean, statistically speaking, the income disparity is pretty big right now. There's a lot about that issue that is just difficult for me to wrap my brain around, because yes, what you said is true, but then on the other hand, a lot of that wealth is not disposable wealth. A lot of that wealth is zeros and ones. It's stocks. It's estimated value of so, like, for instance, there was also a report not too long ago about the number of millionaires and what percentage of people over the age of 60 are millionaires, but the value that they were taking into account to say that these people were millionaires, so much of it was just their homestead, because of the market increasing so much in recent decades. You have people who bought a house 40 years ago for $50,000, and now somehow it's worth $900,000. And sure, that person's a millionaire now because they've got that plus some savings. But it's not the same idea of what a millionaire was a long time ago. And similarly, like, obviously a billionaire is just such a rare person, and should probably be a pretty rare person. But it's hard for me to understand what their actual life looks like when, again, so much of that value is tied up in things like stocks or in intangibles. It's not cash under their mattress. All of that said, something that I would love to see is greater emphasis. I'm not a tax expert by any stretch of the imagination. I do think we can incentivize publicly, in public ways, to say, okay, if you do have that kind of wealth, sure, there's always going to be loopholes in the tax code. What if we provided more opportunities for you to choose to distribute that wealth, and make tax incentives around that? If there's going to be opportunities for you to avoid paying taxes, which personally I like avoiding paying taxes because I like having more control over my money, and I struggle with bureaucracy and I struggle with the government just like any other Texan. But what if we found ways to say, okay, if you want to avoid putting public investments into the federal government, this is how you do that in a way that actually provides public investment through something like a Habitat for Humanity. One of the most difficult parts of that in our country is the fact that our nonprofit system is such a unwieldy and easily misunderstood part of our tax code. I'm a nonprofit, and so is Texas A&M University, where I went to school. We are very, very different organizations. That's something that I think often gets exploited. Not that I don't, value the alma mater, but I also do think that we should be treated a bit differently in terms of donations.
It makes sense to me, and it seems to me that painting with a big brush, very conveniently, is one of my favorite hobbies, right? So here we go. It seems to me that when it comes to helping people, there's a big brush alert. We can rely on individuals to do that out of the kindness of their heart, and let them take care of the marginalized and the poor in our society, and let the churches do that. That's good church work. Or we could let the government do it. And I think that, well, who cares what I think? Which do you think's the better path? Is it
I
either
think it's a
or
false
both and?
dichotomy
Okay.
because, and one of the most important reasons that it's a false dichotomy is so I've been part of lots of different nonprofits, and every nonprofit I've been part of has used government dollars. And so government dollars and public entity or private entities, they often work best together. So I would not be very excited if HUD showed up in Abilene and said, we're going to create a HUD office here in Abilene that's going to run all HUD programs, because I don't think that I think they wouldn't do it as well as we could, as well as Abilenians actually creating programs that fit Abilene. But if you look at what actually happens, there's HUD dollars all across Abilene being spent by charitable organizations and often religious organizations. And some of the best good that I've seen done in Abilene has been done in that model. The sad reality is that you could take all of the money and all of the value and all of the churches across America, and it wouldn't be a drop in the bucket of what is needed. When people talk about we need to let churches do this good, like I figured out, 15 years ago, churches, that's really not the mission of churches. Like that's not, I mean, it's good for churches to be involved in those things, but churches are really good at being churches, or at least they need to be good at being churches. They need to be good at transforming lives into the image of Jesus. But if they're trying to say like, okay, well, we're also going to end poverty, they're probably not going to be very good at it. But they can be part of nonprofits that do that, and they can do that in a very powerful way. But again, even if they liquidated all of their assets, even if they gave all of that money to the nonprofits that they want to support, it wouldn't be a drop in the bucket to what the federal government can do by helping provide funding for those same organizations. But again, if the federal government tries to get, too involved and say we're actually just going to run those things, I don't think it's going to be nearly as good as what we can do locally.
So if we talk about the partnership between a local church and the federal government working together to solve issues in a community, what role do you think spirituality plays in shaping politics in America today? And that's and it can be converse. We could
Yeah.
take the other angle, and it's easy to throw bricks. It's so easy to do that, and but practically speaking, I mean, shouldn't a sense of spiritual morality and ethics and a vision for a better future and the common good shape politics? Should it? Can it? Am I just? I don't know. Am I hearkening back to an era that never was?
Well, I can say that most of my favorite politicians have been people of strong faith. Um, they've been people who their politics were shaped by their faith. Um, I've got a few different angles I could take this. This is an area where I really value the policies of Habitat for Humanity International. We're a faith-based organization, but we also have a non-proselytization policy.
Oh, I love
it's
that.
across
Okay.
the board for all
Explain
Habitat
that.
for Humanity.
So explain
Yeah,
that.
so we believe that people from any background should be part of the work of Habitat for Humanity, and we want them to bring their faith to it. But we as an organization also do not force our faith on anyone else. And by rule, like by bylaw, like that's something that if I start doing, then Habitat International is going to get pretty grumpy with me.
And so
It should be.
So to be clear, anybody would be welcome to participate, to
Oh, yeah.
volunteer, to donate, to help, to come together and build homes, right?
Oh,
Anybody.
I'd love to have Presbyterian church and a Wiccan church building a house alongside each other, because I mean that's bringing people together as part of our mission. Our mission statement is seeking to put God's love in action. Habitat for Humanity brings people together to build homes, communities, and hope. It's it reminds me of my tattoos, which have freaked out a few people because they sound awfully punk rock. But it's from Luke chapter 1, the Magnificat. The spontaneous song that Mary erupted in whenever she realized she was about to give birth to the Messiah. It says on my weak arm it says bring down the mighty, and on my strong arm it says lift up the humble. And it would be really easy to assume that that means that going back to the 1,000 billionaires in our country, it'd be really easy to assume that I'm saying that those people are awful. And it's really not that. It's the thing that I love about what we do at Habitat, and that I think is so central to the gospel, is that the world changes when people come together. That poverty changes when people come together. One of my favorite stories about Habitat for Humanity is it's a recurring story actually, but there's one specific one where a CEO, I want to say it may have been the CEO of Disney, they had a bunch of their people from their central office who were working on a Habitat build, and it just so happened that the janitor from his office was the person with the most experience in construction and ended up being the volunteer construction foreman on the build site, and therefore the CEO of the company was answering to the janitor of the company for that day. And that's an experience that you don't get anywhere else except on something like a Habitat build site. So another way of thinking about that kind of stuff is, I mentioned that I used to be a preacher. I'm a Stone Campbellite. I'm the Churches of Christ, and one of the most famous Stone Campbellites was David Lipscomb, and he was a very firm believer in the idea that the church and government just don't mix well. And this is something the church has struggled with since the beginning of the church. And I'm more in the camp of, hey, maybe we should just not try to take over the government as the church. But I still believe that Christians and people of all faiths should be very, very involved in our government, because that's what our government was built on. It wasn't built on the idea of being taken over by any particular faith. It was built on the idea of bringing faiths together to create something better than we could be otherwise.
Well, and I think you're serious when you say you'd love to see a Presbyterian and a Wiccan.
I don't know if church is the right word, but yeah, however Wiccans gather.
So Habitat has a really, really big tent, and everybody's invited.
Yeah.
And that is a certain level of vision for the common good that is contrary to politics, because although old school politicians would talk about having a big tent where everybody's welcome, and they would gather.
Oh, both parties still talk about it.
Right, they still talk about it, but it seems to me to be much more easy to have a kind of a narrow view, and we're the right ones and everybody else is wrong. And I don't know that that's. I don't know that that's a winning formula for our nation and culture long term.
Yeah.
And I don't care if the right or the left has that view. Inclusion has to be the new normal.
For sure.
And collaboration has become a dirty word for some politicians, but collaboration is written into your DNA at Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, we actually literally can't do our mission without it. Like that's the main verb. If you go back into, what would that be, like fourth grade or English class, when we had to structure sentences and like gerunds and whatever the words were.
Yeah.
They had the lines and everything and the swoops.
I think gerund is a adverb with an ing that functions.
That's right.
As a noun.
That's right.
I think so.
What's mitochondria?
I have no idea.
Oh, the powerhouse of the cell, man. This stuff was all beaten into it.
I thought it was a small island off the coast of Madagascar.
Now, powerhouse of the cell, mitochondria. No, like if you structure the sentence that is the Habitat for Humanity mission statement, the structure of the sentence was always built around the verb, and that the verb for our mission statement is bring. So well, what's the reason we do things? We're seeking to put God's love into action. Well, what do we accomplish? We build homes, communities, and hope. But how do we do it? By bringing people together. And if we start telling different groups, you can't be part of this because your beliefs disagree with my beliefs, well, what I actually like to see happen is say, okay, cool. Well, let's talk about it, but let's just swing a hammer while we're doing it.
I would imagine picking up a hammer is a good place for people to begin, because it's hard to be, you know, really grumpy and argumentative once you start volunteering and working. You know, it
Yeah.
is. It's just hard. There's a certain sense of joy that comes from, you know, volunteerism. There just is,
Yeah.
and anybody that's done it can attribute a changed perspective to that very dynamic. You know, I bet there's a lot of people that leave a Habitat volunteer site smiling.
Oh yeah, I'll say there's two caveats. As long as the hammers swing at the walls instead of each other, and then two, as long as it's not too hot. Which actually we're trying to change our volunteer schedule right now to keep volunteers off the site during the summer, because it's easy for tempers to flare whenever people get too hot, but it's also easy for people to literally actually pass out if it's in these Abilene summers. Our normal volunteers have gotten used to it, and our construction team has gotten used to it, but we had a group build a couple of years ago, and it was literally one of the hottest summers that we had in several years, and they wanted to do all of their group build days. It was Directors Investment Group, actually. Amazing company. I adore Directors Investment Group. They want to do all their volunteer days in July on one of their parking lots. That was a tough week, but exactly what you just said. Even with all of that, like even with the fact that we were going through, I think we had 300 volunteers come through the build site that week. Even with the heat, man, they had loved being able to build that house. Also, we ended up with the partner family got to come out. That was Maria. She's bought her house now. She lives there over on Plum Street. But that company, Directors Investment Group, they basically adopted her and her kids. It was one of the most beautiful things.
Okay, as we start to head toward landing our conversation, I I just got to ask you to share, and I'm sure you have 20 top 10 favorite stories. You've got a bunch, but just give us a couple of your favorite anecdote stories from your experience over the last few years working at Habitat.
Sure. Yeah. I'll do one from Habitat for Humanity, and then I'll do one from my time with the Homeless Coalition, because I think it's pretty indicative of some of the issues that we've talked about. With Habitat for Humanity, it's actually a range of stories. It's being able to, it's all the different times that we get to partner with. Typically, it's a single mom. Typically, she's got 2 to 3 kids. Typically, she's usually a minority of some kinds, and it's these ladies who work their tails off already before they even come into our program. They typically are. You go visit them in their home, the place that they're renting currently, and it's usually not a great place, but it's usually immaculate. They're usually taking really, really good care of it as well as they can. They're hard, they work at least one job. They, take their kids to school. They pick up their kids from school. It's shocking how much they get done. And then whenever they come into our program, whenever they close on their house, and then whenever they do their home blessing, those 3 moments, the joy that they have in those 3 moments that we get to take part in, like there's so many different parts of my job that are boring or tedious or frustrating, but every time we get to do those kinds of conversations or have those kinds of moments, it makes it completely worth it. Which, I mean, to be completely honest, we went from building 1 house per year for those 6 years to we're trying to finish 7 houses this year. I'm wanting to finish 11 houses the following year. My goal is to be able to build 16 homes per year by the end of this decade.
That's a lot of neat stories.
And I can't guarantee that part of the reason for that goal being so high is that I'm not a little addicted to those moments, because it's incredible.
I would imagine. By the way, do you get to go into the homes once they've furnished the homes? Because I'm just wondering if you've ever seen a little kid who's never had their own room.
Oh yeah.
Run and jump on their bed. This is my room.
Even more fun than that, we had one family. We built a house. This was a couple years ago. After we had framed the house, the family came, and like I said, it was just a frame. Like it was just the studs. And the kid went into his room and he wrote his name on the slab. And it's because he said, that's going to be my room, and it's the first time I'll have had my own room by myself. Yeah, you can't beat that. Wow. The other story I wanted to tell, and this is this one's actually specific. This is when I was with the Homeless Coalition. We had this couple. Ironically, this was actually the first assessment that I did when I was with the Homeless Coalition. I started the week before Thanksgiving, trained on the assessments, the computer program and everything. And the day before Thanksgiving was like my fourth day. And it just so happened almost everyone else had already left for the holiday, and I was the only one left in the office. But this family came in and wanted to do an assessment. Okay, we'll do this assessment. We ended up talking for about 2 hours. And as a couple, she was mostly blind. They had been homeless for over a year at that point. So because of her disability and because of the length of homelessness, they were considered chronically homeless. And so within a few weeks, they were the next person on the list. And so my job was to actually partner with landlords to help get people off the streets and into a place. We didn't, they didn't have to go into our shelter first. I was like, one day they're homeless, the next day they have a home. And so he didn't have a job because they were staying. This was before. This was. Is that a Taco Bell that's over on South 14th near HEB or something like that?
Yeah, it was a Taco Bell there.
It was, but it's on the south side of the street. It wasn't the Taco Bell. It was something across. Oh, Baskin Robbins. It was the.
Now it's a Baskin Robbins.
Yeah, before. Yeah, okay, yeah, before that.
And a Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, so
and
before
I've never gone there. I want you to know.
I
never
100% trust you right now.
I've never gone there.
It's Vice Central. So yeah, they were sleeping on the ground outside in the alley behind that building, and before it was renovated into what it is now. And so that building is right next to a daycare. And so the first decision they had to make in the morning, what's the first thing you do in the morning? You pee. So the first decision they had to make was, are we going to try to find somewhere that's going to let us go inside to use the restroom, or are we going to use the restroom right here in the place that we're currently sleeping, and potentially have a felony charge because we're peeing outside of a daycare. I ended up finding them whenever it was time to house them. They were sleeping under an overhang. It's now that new fancy, cool senior living center that was turned into. It was an old school over off of South 10th, and now it's the Landing or something like that. Really cool project. But they were sleeping under an awning there. And the first morning that I went to go find them to show them apartments, the temperature was about 8 degrees. And it took me about 10 minutes to wake them up. And I really thought I was going to have to call an ambulance because I thought that they had died. Fast forward a few weeks, we find them a place, we move them into the place, and I've set up a meeting at their new apartment with our case manager for that program. And we get there, and the lady was there, but the guy wasn't. And I got really frustrated. I was like, where is he? Like, we literally just set this meeting up yesterday. He knows that he's supposed to be here to meet with the case manager. And she said, Rosten, he has a job. I said, what are you talking about? I saw him yesterday. And she said, he's had this drywall crew that's been trying to hire him for months, but because we didn't have an address, they didn't know where they could find us every day. And so they couldn't hire him so they could come pick him up and take him to work. And so the first thing that he did after they moved in was he called them and said, hey, I'm going to be at this address every morning. Come pick me up. And all of a sudden, just because he had an address, he had a job. So in the time that I worked for the Homeless Coalition, I think that I did probably 400 different assessments of families that were currently experiencing homelessness. And so out of those 400 families, and I had to ask this question, it was part of the assessment was talking about employment. Every single family that I talked with in those 2 years that I was the frontline worker at the Homeless Coalition, every one of those families wanted a home and wanted employment. It was just that the employment and the homes that they had access to because of their barriers were it was low quality homes, or it was not great landlords, or it was places that had a bad reputation, or it was employment that they just couldn't they couldn't commit to, or that they couldn't make work because of their situation. And so often they had given up on the idea that they could actually have a reasonable home and a reasonable job. But man, once we got those folks housed, they loved being housed and they wanted work.
Well, the the federal approach of housing first has been so helpful to frame the solution, because if you get a homeless person in a home, then they can find a job, then they can find treatment for the other issues. But outside of a home, boy, where do they
Yeah,
go?
it's like a force multiplier is the easiest way to describe it. It's something that, it's one of those things that if you take care of that thing, it just makes everything else easier. And I'd say it's the same thing with home ownership. It's even though the folks that I was working with back then, it didn't make sense to sell them a house. The folks that I work with now, selling them a house, it becomes that thing that, well, it's a new house. It's been very well built, lovingly built by Habitat for Humanity, so it's not going to have that many issues for quite a while. There are exceptions to that sometimes, but we take care of those exceptions. But whenever we move people from the experience of renting a not great place to owning a great place, it is a platform from which they can change their lives.
Wow. It seems like we've ranged through so many things in the conversation, but it comes back to that, changing people's lives, helping people. I mean, that's really what your work is all about, right? Yeah. And it should be what the work for the common good is about for anybody in any sector that should be helping people, be it we've talked about politics, we've talked about church, we've talked about other religions and the religious experiences, we've talked about the nonprofit world, we've talked about banking. I'm in journalism now, and
Sure.
and I have a
With a
young
background
lady,
in nonprofits.
and I have a lady that I've come to know who's written a book, and her contention is the purpose of journalism is to help people. And I read that, and it just, man, it was a light bulb. And boy, if we could get everybody to believe that about their line of work,
Yeah.
you make the tortillas at HEB,
Good tortillas.
good tortillas.
I can't eat them anymore because I'm gluten free now, but that's
I
sad.
can't eat them for other reasons, addictive behavior, personality issues. But yeah, helping people.
Yeah.
That's really it. So I appreciate so much the conversation.
Yeah.
Just back off for a second. I think just big picture. What would you like to see in Abilene? What would you like to see going on in Abilene in 10 or 20 years? What would you like to see?
Wow, that's a great question.
And you can go anywhere you want with this. One guest once said a super target. I thought that was pretty good.
Care about that.
Another guest said no potholes. I thought that was pretty good. What does Rosten Callarman say? What would you like to see in Abilene? A bouncy house on every corner. I'd be a fan for that. A snow cone machine, in every home. I'd be a fan for that.
You said in a decade?
Yeah, 10 years from now.
I mean, well, I mentioned a minute ago that my goal is for us to be able to build 16 houses a year. I said that we have closed on 180 total houses. We have actually built from the ground up about 150 houses. We've done 30 that were also rehabs, remodels, those kinds of things that we sold.
Well, imagine
So
how
we
Abilene
built-
would be different if you had 160 additional homes 10 years from now
That's actually
that
it.
were
Yeah.
1 year at their newest or 1 month at their newest, but 10 years at their oldest. I mean, that'd
Yeah,
be
I want to double our new home production in the next 10 years. And I look at, the track that we're on that we've been on, 4 houses per year over 10 years. That's 40 new homes in Abilene over the next 10 years. That's great. Like that's 40 changed families. That's 40 changed lives. And that has repercussions for education, economics, their employment, everything. But if I think of 160 new homes over that same time, that's changed neighborhoods. That's a changed Abilene market. That affects the new home market. That affects the rental market. That affects every aspect of our economy, and it's doable. Personally, I'm also I'm a very competitive person. And if we were actually building, I think if we were doing more than 13 homes in a year, that would also put us in the top 4% of Habitat for Humanity affiliates nationwide for new home production. And
You'd
I
like
really
that.
love the idea. So there's a top producers conference, and I love the idea of little 130,000 person Abilene showing up at that top producers conference, and it being, Miami, Fort Worth, San Antonio, all those other big cities. Like, what are you doing here? Like, well, let me tell you what we're doing.
That'd be pretty salty. That'd be
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah, I like that. Now, you commented on that thing that I posted. I'm a husband, dad, goofball dreamer, and I'm trying to end poverty. That's not just fluff. Like the wanting to end poverty and dreamer piece. Like that's for whatever reason, the idea that poverty is just an acceptable thing is offensive to me. And if we could make a measurable dent in affordability for Abilene, then I would be happy.
Quick strategic question. In your opinion, is a place to live that you call home, is that the foundational key, or maybe one of the foundational keys to ending poverty for a family? They have a place.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not just about having a structure that's around you. It's about that structure being home, about that structure being reliable, about that structure being safe, about that structure being something that you can count on, a place that you can come back to that's yours. And there'll always be barriers to that. The fact that our families do have to get a loan from the bank and have to reliably pay that loan, that will be hard for some families. Our job is to remove as many of those barriers as possible, to partner with those families to remove as many barriers as possible. But it's also possible, and we have a great track record of it.
Great conversation.
Yeah, back at you, man.
Man, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Need to be thinking about having you back. You got a big event coming up.
That's right.
And it's a gala and it's a fundraiser. Just briefly mention it and talk about it for a second.
Yeah, it's a really fun event. It's low key. It's our third annual Habitat for Humanity Homecoming Gala. Gala. There's too many ways to pronounce that word. I'm terrible at it. Last year the theme was pretty in pink and all, so it's like John Hughes movies from the 80s, Breakfast Club, that kind of thing. Poofy sleeves, pushed for the ladies, pushed up blazers for the guys, like Don Johnson. This year the theme is going to be a little more glamorous. It's Starry Night.
Oh, Starry Night.
Van Gogh.
Okay. Well,
Van Gogh themed.
When you said glamorous, I was thinking hee-haw.
Glamorous for not you glamorous. Most people, other people glamorous.
Okay. I got you. Have to adjust my expectations.
Yeah, it's a really fun event. It's there's lots of ways to get involved. We still have some tables left. There's you go to habitatabi.org. That's our website. It's habitatabi.org.
And we'll Travis will put that down in CGs on the podcast.
And another great way to be involved, and this is one of my reasons why I love this event so much. The people who are in any of these events around town, the people who are part of the event, they're the fundraisers for the event. So like Abilene, Dancing with the Stars or Abilene Idol, those kinds of things. But at those events, they have to learn a dance or they have to learn a routine or a song or something like that. It's a lot of pressure on them, which is fun too. But with this one, it's literally just a popularity contest. We've got the homecoming court, and it's $1 per vote. So if you want to support one of our homecoming king or queen nominees,
I think one of the queen nominees happens to be an anchor on KRBC.
That's right.
By the name of Abby Green.
Yeah,
I know you can't say anything about that, but
but she's lovely. She's
I
a really great
can
lady.
say Abby Green, KRBC, Abilene's local news, Abilene's first TV station, and Abby is one of your homecoming queen nominees. There.
And I can vouch for her. She's a great lady.
Yeah,
she's a very kind person. I really appreciate her. She's been very supportive of Habitat.
Man, what a treat to have you on the podcast!
Always a treat to talk with you.
I would like to have you back someday. I'm thinking of a conversation, as winter approaches, where we might even bring one of your friends in the homeless world. helping homeless people. Cold weather, just it seems to me to bring out the our better angels, and we're thinking about our neighbors on the street more and more in the cold weather. So
You want to know something that's really cool about our homeless coalition? In addition to the fact that we're one of the most well-known and respected local homeless coalitions in the nation, our homeless coalition also, several of our top leaders have themselves experienced homelessness, which is not common. It's like, and these, and it's not like these people have been elevated inappropriately. Like these are brilliant, thoughtful, passionate people who have just themselves have experienced homelessness.
And I'm gonna stretch it one more minute. I want to say so many of the things that people think about homeless persons are just foundationally untrue. Well, they don't want to work. That's not true. They're just lazy. Certainly not true. I mean, the preponderance of homeless people are actually very gifted, very skilled people who've had a series of horrible things occur, and they haven't had a safety net.
That's right.
And they end up on the streets. Isn't that true?
Yes.
So it's no surprise to me that you have very smart, gifted people who know what's up, who are going to be very helpful in addressing homelessness, who once themselves were homeless.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us here on Abilene People. And again, big shout out to Rosten Callarman, our guest today, the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity Abilene. And a big shout out to our ace producer, Travis Corrigan, who does all the live switching. So everything you've seen, there's a guy sitting over there. I wish I could make the camera go over and show you who he is. But just a real asset to the podcast and all the work.
Good hair.
Yeah, he's got great hair. He's got great hair. It's fantastic hair. In fact, this week I told him his new haircut reminded me of he was a grown up Macaulay Culkin. Is that his name?
Macaulay Culkin.
Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah.
He didn't like that compliment. I thought it was a great compliment. He did not like that compliment.
I think we're pretty close to the same age. I think that's for us. That brings back just Home Alone is the entire association we have with Macaulay Culkin. So you told him he has the hair of a 8-year-old or something.
But I don't know.
An obnoxious 8-year-old.
When I think of Home Alone, I think of isn't it Joe Pesci and he the comic relief?
Joe Pesci and what was that tall guy's name?
Yeah, the tall guy.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So thank you for being with us as we digress yet again. And I'm your host, Danny Sims, and we will be back again with, I guarantee you, one of Abilene's most interesting people here on Abilene People at BigCountryHomepage.com. See you next time.